Hey everyone. So today you get to check out the newest addition to the HydrosPlus fleet, a 2025-2025R, which is obviously brand spanking new. Now I don't know if John Deere, they don't release their tractors the way car dealerships, which I think typically do in sometime in August. I think you're just now seeing 2025, not the R, but the 2025 year model showing up on dealership lots. And maybe in February, but it wasn't really before February as far as I could tell. I looked all over to try to find a 2025 model for the reasons of why I had to buy a brand new one. There are some changes hydraulically on the 1 Series and this 2025R that are relevant to HydrosPlus. Now, I've already done a lot of research in the background, and the short answer, and we'll get into more detail a little later, but the short answer is my solution is roughly going to be the same. The plumbing will be a little bit different, but there's no real functional difference between the solution that goes on the 2025R, or the previous to 2025 year model, and then the 2025 year model. But what I thought I would do is take you through some of the features. I know there's probably other videos out there where people have taken you through some of the features, but I'm going to take you through the features as I see them relevant to HydrosPlus, and so that I can talk about what I'm thinking about working on. I'm not going to give any timelines. Every timeline I had last year just completely blew up. But I'll tell you where my mind is on what I'm going to focus on first and second and third, etc. I can tell you unequivocally the first focus I'm going to have for this platform is changing the plumbing so that those who are just now receiving their 2025 year models, I've already had a number of calls where people were looking for the HydrosPlus kit, but they did not. They didn't even have their tractor yet, and they didn't know that it isn't going to work immediately, but it will definitely work in a very near future, especially now that I have this machine in front of me. So before I start yanking pieces off this tractor and investigating them and trying to figure out what it is we need to change, I need to do my normal battery of tests that I do on pretty much every tractor as I bring it in. Now, you may not see every one of them on video, but typically I'm going to do a simple battery of tests to kind of get some baselines. And I think I do most of them, but if you're thinking I have a tractor I haven't done, like a 1023 I haven't done, but I did a 1025R, so there's that. So the baseline of test, or the battery of tests for the baselines, are we're going to do lift capacity, and we're not going to do it with this beautiful unscratched bucket. One thing I didn't really count on, I don't buy tractors new, and I'm only buying this one new because there's no way to get the features of this tractor without buying a new one, so that is what it is. But otherwise, I'm not buying a new tractor. I'm buying it used. I don't want to pay sales tax. I do not want to be the first person to put the first scratch on it, and I really have never had a bucket this pristine, and I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to probably package it up and put it in the closet. No, I'm just kidding. I have so many buckets it doesn't really matter, but I am going to get a bucket with Ken's bolt-on hooks on the top so that I can do the lift capacity test with the stock loader. Now, we're not expecting any surprises with this loader, but we'll go ahead and do the test so that we have the data. The next thing we'll do is a pressure test, and then we'll do a hydraulic flow test. And of course, that's going to be a little bit different, or could be a little bit different, because we do have a new hydraulic pump on this machine. Now, as far as I can tell from the literature, there's no real change in hydraulic flow, but we'll confirm that. And then while we're talking about this, when I ordered this tractor, there was a mistake made, and it was supposed to have a single point connector here, and it does not, unfortunately. And I don't know if this is exactly how we're gonna deal with this, but it looks like if you buy the single point, most of you who have a single point after the fact probably know this, if you buy the single point after the fact, then you do not get the hard lines that come out through here. And that is one of the reasons I wanted that in the first place. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have even gotten a loader, because I've got, a couple of these sitting around. And most of what I need is actually on the tractor side. But nonetheless, this is virtually the same loader that this tractor, not this tractor, but the 1 Series would have come with all the way back in 2011. Yes, there are some minor changes, but functionally, it's the same loader. And we'll get it. I'll get into the small changes, even from like the 2018 that I have to this loader. I'll get to that in just a bit. But I want to go ahead and jump back to our most important, most valuable piece of information. So this is the new hydraulic pump on the 1 Series and the 2025R. I call this the 2nd gen. It probably is still technically a 2nd gen, but there's some changes on this tractor that would be, separate it from even a 23 and then all the way back to probably 2017. So this pump is a dual pump. You can see we've got hydraulic flow coming here, going back up in this direction, and it actually goes into the transaxle. And then the hydraulic outlet here on the back, and you can see these are both 3/8 lines that are coming out. So on the previous year models, we had a pump here and we had a 1/2-inch line going into a proportional flow divider. In this case, it does the splitting of the flow here, and this goes up into the loader SCV, which is the same place that the flow goes first from that proportional divider. So when you talk about hydraulically, is this a material change? The dual pump is a material change. Well, it's not a material change. This is a physical change, but what you're achieving is effectively the same. And we'll see what the actual flow rate is, but again, my expectation is it's going to be virtually the same as the previous year. There may be a little bit more, maybe a little less, I don't know, but we will learn that together, because I literally just got this tractor yesterday afternoon, didn't have a chance to do anything with it. Now, looking down to here, the way that the sump comes up, you can see that back there, it's basically the same. Now we'll see if there's any significant difference, but that looks to be the same. This tube basically looks to be the same. This elbow is the same, going into a pump affixed to the same place. I'm going to pull this pump off, take it apart, see what's inside. I'll show you that at some point in the future, but I want to see kind of how they handled this and what changes I need to make. Am I going to get a dual pump? Probably not. The reason for that is there's not a significant advantage to having this dual pump versus having a single pump with a splitter. Now, there's only one I'm going to call it a symptom, but there's only one situation I can think of that doesn't generally happen with a dual pump, but it also doesn't happen as much with a proportional flow divider like this tractor previously came with. That does happen with a priority flow divider, which is what we use with HydrosPlus, but it is only in very specific situations, and most people don't actually notice it. Even if you notice it, there's no downside to it. It is just a symptom that you experience based on quick pressure changes and what you're doing in between those. So I've got a video on that. If I remember, I'll link it here. But other than that, the advantage of having a dual pump, there really isn't one. Now, that doesn't mean I won't eventually have a dual pump that replaces this, but I don't plan to at this point, and here's why. About 2.5 years ago, I actually went to the same manufacturer and investigated having a dual pump that would fit in this location. And I'm not suggesting that work ended up being this, but it very well could have been. It was very similar to this, and the reason I didn't pursue it was the tooling costs were pretty expensive, and there wasn't talking through it with the engineers, there was not a material difference or any advantage to having a dual pump based on what we were doing at the time. The disadvantage to a dual pump, at least with that technology, was was as you wanted to make it bigger. So as you can, I don't know if you can see, the dual pumps have sections, of course. This back section is what feeds the implements. This is what feeds the steering and a few other things, cooling, etc. And then you have inlet that actually only goes into the front one of these, and then the back one there's a port that goes through. And I'll show this as we pull this pump off and take it apart. But because there's two sections, then there needs to be, you can see it there. So there's a section here, and then a section behind. That middle section is there to separate the two pumps. And because you have that, it ends up making the flow or the overall body of it bigger than it has to be than if you were just to have a single pump and you could omit that section and end up with the same displacement. That said, it also emits a whole nother flow separation device, which in our case I don't see as a disadvantage because we just tuck it in over here. The disadvantage is if we want to go much bigger on the pump side of this, then it ends up being a larger overall pump. Now, we'll have to get the measurements on it, but it looks like this pump for the same size as it was previous, where, if we get 3.5 to 4 gallons a minute on the implement side, then this pump is definitely thicker than that original pump, but they've made accommodations for it with sticking this out. And the transaxle may be a lot different because there are at least some changes, because there isn't a what they call the PTO manifold where the flow is separated, so it's certainly different in that aspect. So that pretty much covers the hydraulic side of this. And but while we're in the PTO area, the other thing that part of the test that we do on this is get the PTO horsepower for this machine. Now, if you're not familiar, 2025R, 1025R have the same PTO horsepower. And before I leave, I did check on in the parts catalog. That pump is the same on the 1025 as it is on the 2025. I'll double check that, but I'm pretty sure that's the same. On the previous models, the 2025R had just like less than 1 cc difference, so it was about 4 gallons a minute, and the wide open throttle, and the 1025 was like 3.5. So we're going to do PTO horsepower, we're going to do hydraulic flow, we're going to do hydraulic pressure, we're going to do lift capacity. What else are we going to do? I should potentially do something with temp, but we're not going to do that. Let me open the hood and I'll just kind of show you what's inside there. Not a lot different, but a few small changes. Okay, I was going to pop the hood and take the side panels off, but that turned out to be a little tougher than expected with the cab on, so I'm just going to leave that for a later time. I think we can kind of see down in here, no significant changes from what I remember and what they look like. It still has these here, which is interesting to me that they're still making them that way. Maybe they made so many of them it still has to be that way, but it seems like they would change it. Maybe a different application uses that for something, but given the fact that John Deere had so much trouble with theirs, you would think they would call that a bad idea and not use it in the future. But what do I know? On the front here, because it has a cab, we have this washer fluid, which if you want to go with the Cooler Plus on this, you'll have to relocate that or get rid of it altogether. This here is the same cooler, making sure, yeah, that's the same cooler that they've had since basically 2017. Radiator looks the same to me. Headlights are different. These are LED, but those were updated quite a while ago, so no significant difference there. We'll walk over here to this side, and one change, I wonder if I have one. I'll have to go look and see if I have the comparative muffler here, but this muffler is, I would say, smaller, and the outlet is here. Now, one thing about the 2025R that's a little bit different than a 1025R is that you would think when you get a 2025R you would have a 120R loader, but because the tires are bigger you actually get more lift height, and that's not the case. They changed the loader mounts such that you do not get that additional lift height there. That's the way it was before. And you'll notice, like if you look at a 2025R, if you happen to have the chance to see one in front of or one beside a 2025R, the loader in relation to the hood looks like it's lower. And again, that's because from that relative perspective it is, because the tires are bigger, and again you end up with the same lift height. Now this exhaust exit, a lot of people, I see it there, it's coming out here, which is kind of what we've done at HydrosPlus on the HydrosPlus Turbo Plus. We've made it come out, and I've started kind of pointing them this direction as well, but it's a little bit forward of here. So I happen to think that that's probably, of course I do, but I think it's a better location than what it was before, which was pointing this direction, and people complain that it would blow on here and it blows on the front loader. And that's because anytime you start it up, it's a mechanical governor. Because you started up, the governor is not flung out yet, so you're always going to have excess fuel at startup, and that's the black soot that you see. Of course, also when you bog it down, you'll have a little bit more particulate matter. But other than this here, I don't see anything significantly different. Doesn't mean there's not. I'm just telling you what I see. And again, there are other videos out there that may be a little more comprehensive. Last thing while I'm here, maybe the last thing before we kind of hop inside for just a second, is on the 120R loader, they changed this in 2023, and we had to make a change here at HydrosPlus. You'll notice these ports come out the bottom. On previous year models, they actually come out the side. I'm not sure why they chose, I thought the reason they chose to start coming out the bottom was because if you do get the single point connector, there's less room in here, and I don't know if they thought that it might have some chance of getting too close, when the tube came out. That is speculation, but that is one minor change. Another minor change, and I don't know exactly when they did this, but this looks different than the older 2020 and before. But other than that, this is the same loader, same features. Oh, I say other than that. Now you're going to start seeing, and this thing is completely useless in my opinion, but if you have this or you like this, to each their own, I would take it off. But it's on the right or on the left side as you're sitting into the tractor. Previously, that always came on the other side. They moved it because, well, if you got the third function, the instructions for the third function would have you move it to that side anyway. And I think they finally moved it when the single point started coming out and being popular, because with the single point, you can potentially have some interference with that as well. All right, jumping inside, I don't think there's a material change to anything in here, with the exception of the cab features that, they're not relevant for the model year change. On a 2025R, if you're not familiar, they've always had kind of a nicer operator station. Now the lights are, of course, on top of the cab. They're not beside you like they are on the open station, but these linkages were always generally like this on the 2025R. We've got our knockouts, no third function, so we have just the standard joystick. And you can hear it's very echoey in here. It's a small space and lots of hard surfaces. We do have a USB-C. I'm assuming that's standard for all tractors, probably 23 and up even. That's the last time they made a change to buttons and other things, including these knockouts. But other than that, the same stuff. I don't know when the seat changed. It seems to be a little nicer than at least the ones I had are familiar with, 18 to probably 21-ish. But I think they changed this before this model year, just a little embroidered. But of course, this is, even though it has a cab, it's still kind of an exterior seat that they have. Looking at the dash is different. And this one has a sticker on it saying installed smart connector. So that's already on this machine. You can get a few pieces of information. I haven't done that yet, but we'll see what is available to us. Now, when I turn this on, there's gonna be a lot of button or things that light up. So we have This is neutral. If you're in neutral, it's going to stay on. If you're not, it'll flash at you. But we've got oil pressure, or no oil pressure is what it's trying to tell me. We've got PTO, glow plugs, battery, of course. But a couple things that light up. Now, Bluetooth will probably light up when you have your smart connector hooked up. But this has 1 and 2, so it's suggesting this can tell us what gear range it's in. Maybe that's a future update to this. But generally speaking, I think this seems to be the same dash, roughly size-wise and everything, as the previous, just updated internals here. Still tilt steering, everything else felt the same to me. Four-wheel drive's in the same place. Parking brake's been changed for a couple of years, so that's kind of it in a nutshell. As far as what I can see that is not on the tractor is new to 2025, and I'm probably not the best place to go to get all of the nuances of the 2025 versus the previous year models, but for me, it's really about the hydraulics and about how things connect. Well, I guess the engine as well, some of these small changes that we've seen in the engine won't have a material difference for the HydrosPlus Turbo Plus. Well, with all that, let's go ahead. I'm going to get a bucket and we will get ready to do some of our battery of test to see how this actually compares to previous year models of this tractor. It's like an unintentional commercial for the HydrosPlus Flat Face Plus. I mean, that's how much. Of course, some came out of here. That usually doesn't happen, but like that puddle there was all from this actually one. It did not. Didn't really come out of this. The blue one. Oh, come on. Okay. Pressure gauge. Let's see what she's got. Let's see, her red will be pushing down, I think. Hopefully I tightened everything up. At idle 2100. So 2200, that's the same spec as they had before, at least the same setting now. Is the pump capable of more? The previous pump, did not. That's basically, it was working pressure of 2000 psi, and I think that's my hypothesis of why this tractor set at 2100. It's not, I don't think it's a safety thing at all. I mean, they may have factored that in the whole setup, but the reason the tractor is at 2100 psi is because the previous pump and possibly this pump as well that is what the working pressure is of it. Burst pressure is like 22, 23. Not burst. Pumps don't have burst pressure the same way as like hydraulic hoses, but ultimately they factor all that in, so that determines, what size cylinders potentially, or maybe they're not paying attention at all and they're just throwing stuff on here. I have no idea, but I can tell you that 2100, I think there's no accident of why that's the spec. It has to do with the pump. Everything else on this tractor is going to be rated at 3000 or 3500 psi. Working pressure, meaning burst pressure, is going to be 3 or 4 times that. So again, that's speculation, but I think the most likely answer. Let me get my hydraulic flow meter and let's see what we can do on flow. All right, now we've got our hydraulic gauge hooked up. Let's see what she does. Let's see here. Start it up. Start idle. Pull back on the stick. Okay. That's 2.5 roughly, which is about what they had before. like about 4.5, which is more than the previous. Now, I say more than the previous. It is probably more in line with the original 2025R pump, which is a little bit bigger than the 1025R pump. So looks like at least probably half a gallon a minute gain. Half a gallon a minute gain for the 2025R, but it may be a full gallon per minute gain for the 1025R in comparison to the previous model year. Now, to me, that's still not even close to enough, and of course, that's what I would say. But anything helps, especially if you're somebody who doesn't want to modify their tractor and you're going to run stock and you're going to run these little small, toothpicky little. Honestly, I looked at these, and I haven't really paid attention to them in a while, and I thought that they might have went smaller. So my thought was, maybe what they did was increase the pressure, so they have a new pump, so maybe they could run bigger pressure and make this smaller, which if you kept the flow the same, you would end up going faster. So you'd have a better loader experience and you would still be able to lift the same amount, but you would, potentially have smaller cylinders. That was a guess I had at one point because I looked at them, I was like, that cannot be the same as the ones before, but actually it is. So I'm just not used to seeing them so small because I don't have any stock tractors sitting around for the most part. But, so we've got hydraulic flow, 1025, probably getting a gallon a minute more, roughly. 2025R, another half gallon a minute. Not sure if that's going to translate into much at the loader, but it will feel better if you did them side by side. I feel like you would notice a difference. So, last thing, I'm going to see what kind of lift capacity we can get. Not last thing on the front side of this, and then we're going to get out our friend, the power comparison apparatus, and get our last measurement on PTO horsepower, see if we had any gains there. So let me hook everything up on the front and we'll get that going. This bucket's seen better days, but I think she'll do. I think she got in a fight with a skid steer. Everything's teared off. We've got a peak set. That's what that P there in the middle is. We're at 0. We're gonna do these in pounds. And start it up. I want to make sure I'm curled all the way back. I don't want the curl to affect the lift. I don't have any ballast, so we're going to see what happens. $1,018. So 1,018 at 24 inches ish, but probably 24 inches in front of the pin and 24 inches off the ground. So that's really directly proportional to the pressure, which is at 2,100 psi. So, if you had one and you tested it and it was less than that, a lot of times I hear people saying 800 pounds, which is accurate, but also you got to realize is it all the way up or exactly where you're measuring it. This is a pretty good result. I think the 2,100 psi helps, and then the fact that we're this far out, so you could probably get something 1,000 pounds just off the ground, on forks. If it's evenly distributed, you could probably get close to 1,000 pounds and move it around. You're not going to put it in the back of your truck, but you'll be able to move it around at least. All right, last test. We're going to see what this PTO does. We've got now one thing here, this will not, if you do this, then you can't open the thing. So there's that, but I'm going to get our cover off here. Anything? Yuck. Yep, let me hook it up, see what happens. All right, got everything hooked up with the power comparison apparatus. We've got hopefully our pump is secured. We've got our Make sure that's at 0. I've got our digital gauge at 0, got our calculator at the ready. And so we are ready to get started. I did have to go ahead and have to put the bypass on the seat because I have no idea how to start the PTO and keep it running. I think this is different than the previous ones, but like I would turn the PTO on, you gotta be in the seat, turn on the PTO. When I got up, PTO would just shut off. Didn't kill the tractor, just shut off the PTO, which I kind of like, but couldn't figure out how to do it otherwise. So I just went ahead and bypassed it. Let's see here, get this started. Got a PTO on. Let me show you this. You can see there's a gauge here now, and I'll move up the RPM. You can see these dots starting to show up, and there's a target right here. And right now it's telling me it's below, or PTO is below speed. So that's new information, good to have. Start pulling it down here. So I've started doing it where I pull it down and then let it off a little bit and then pull it back down just to see if there's any change. And I didn't really notice a change on this one, but on the Kubota, for whatever reason, it seemed like that did make a little bit of a difference when I was doing the measurement. But generously, 1500. I saw more consistently probably 1460, 1480, but we'll go with 1500. We can do both, I guess. Hang on, 15. Oh, come on, stop. I think something's in there. 1500, golly. Times 15 gallons a minute times our coefficient of 0.0007. This takes into consideration that this pump is not 100% efficient. It's assuming it's about 80% efficient, which is pretty standard in the industry. Enter 15 3/4. So 15 3/4 on this machine is a little bit low. It's actually right in line with what we saw on both Kubotas. But every 1025R that I've run has been 17, between 17 and 18 actually. This one's a little low. Now this one has 0.6 hours on it, so there's that. So maybe that's a factor. But I would say that's not going to be that much of a factor. Now, is this exactly right for horsepower? No. I can say no unequivocally, but I do think it's very close. And for what I'm trying to do, it's not a dyno, but what I'm trying to do, eventually we're going to have a turbo on this machine, and then we'll compare it to itself, and you can see what kind of power difference you have. But that's really what I would say this is good for. Now, one thing, let me just see if I'm noticing this right. Maybe I'm not. Let's start it up. Now, there's the exhaust there. See the puff of smoke. You always have that puff of smoke because it's a mechanically injected engine. The governor is not thrown out, so it's giving it all the fuel it can on startup. And then and then it flies out and pulls the RPMs and everything back. But, see if I see this right. So what was I doing? I was trying to see if I saw any black smoke puffing out as I was changing RPMs rapidly. Typically, I know, pretty sure on the Kubotas like that, and on all my 1 series, if you were to do that quickly, you would even with a stock machine, you're definitely going to see some black smoke, which means unspent fuel, which means it has plenty of fuel. What it's lacking is oxygen. This one seems like it's probably leaned out to a point, and that may be why we're seeing the 15 3/4 versus the 17.5 or whatever is advertised. Because the other thing is, they don't dyno every one of these engines. So even though the engine from a factory testing standpoint got 17.1, or at the PTO it got that much power, your mileage is definitely may vary. And that's what we're seeing on this machine, that machine, and also on the 2038. That one was fairly far below based on the power comparison apparatus, which is not a dyno, but I'm getting very consistent numbers according to the literature for like the 3R, all the 1 series, and I think pretty consistent on the 1023 as well. So anyway, I'm not trying to make an excuse or try to explain anything other than the fact that I know that the engine is more capable, and I know that a lot of the stock engines on this exact same setup produce more horsepower. I think it's just a matter of what the fuel screw was set at when this one came off the line. Also, I would say this is the same power comparison apparatus that we're using on the Kubota out there that got 30 horsepower with the turbo. So if it's truly off by 2 horsepower under, then that thing's, the Kubota with the turbo is like 32 horse. I'm not likely to be that far off, is my opinion, but you never know. Not the important part. The important part is eventually we'll turbo this machine, we'll compare it to itself, and we'll give you a sense of what kind of increases you can see relative to what you have. So I think that's it for this one. That's my battery of tests. The next thing to come up is I'm going to start ripping parts off of this, starting with that guy right there, and we're going to see what's inside. We'll do some measurements. We'll see if this 4.5 gallon per minute jives with the measurements that we get on the inside. We'll see how it's made just for fun on top of that. And then we'll start to see what changes are going to be necessary in order to get the hydraulic HydrosPlus solution onto the 2025 year model machines. That's it for this one. Questions, comments, leave them below, and thanks for watching.